Star Trek fans may not have realized, but one of the show's biggest betrayals was all an act. For over half a century, Star Trek has been a franchise built on ideals of trust, loyalty, and the unshakable bonds between starship crews. It's one of the reasons betrayals, rare though they are, sting so deeply when they occur. From power-hungry admirals to manipulative alien forces, the galaxy has no shortage of treachery. Yet one of the most shocking betrayals in Star Trek history wasn't what it seemed at all. In fact, it was all an elaborate act. This twist not only redefined how fans saw the character at the center of it, but also showed just how far Star Trek could push the boundaries of trust, espionage, and sacrifice in pursuit of a greater good. While casual viewers may have taken the betrayal at face value, longtime fans looking closer realized that it was never genuine. It was a performance layered with purpose. So, which betrayal wasn't truly a betrayal? For many fans, the clearest example comes from Michael Eddington's shocking turn in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But an even more intricate deception existed long before him, one that linked Starfleet's brightest minds to the clandestine shadows of Section 31 and beyond. The most powerful revelation? Sometimes betrayal is the ultimate form of loyalty. The nature of betrayal in Star Trek, unlike other science fiction franchises that thrive on backstabbing and double crosses, Star Trek uses betrayal sparingly. When it does appear, it's typically framed as a violation of the Federation's highest ideals: trust, honesty, and unity. Betrayals stand out because they clash so violently with Gene Roddenberry's vision of a utopian future where humanity has supposedly moved past deception. Think of Admiral Cartwright in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, who colluded in the conspiracy to sabotage peace with the Klingons. Or the numerous compromised Starfleet officers on Deep Space Nine, where the Dominion's infiltration tested the Federation's very soul. In nearly every case, betrayal meant corruption of principle. But there's one betrayal that flips the script, an apparent act of treason that wasn't treason at all. Commander Michael Eddington, the seeming turncoat. Eddington was introduced as a loyal Starfleet security officer on DS9, even serving as Odo's second-in-command. Steadfast, calm, and seemingly by the book, he was the quintessential Starfleet officer until he wasn't. In Season 4's For the Cause, Eddington betrays Captain Sisko and defects to the Maquis, the rogue faction of Federation colonists resisting Cardassian rule. To Sisko, it's one of the most personal betrayals of his career. Eddington not only undermines Starfleet's mission, but also delivers a passionate monologue painting the Federation as a homogenizing force, stripping individuality from its citizens. For viewers, it felt like a shocking, almost personal betrayal. Eddington wasn't just another compromised officer, he was a man Sisko trusted, a man who wore the uniform with pride. Yet the brilliance of Eddington's betrayal lies in what came after. Over time, fans began to see that his so-called treachery wasn't self-serving. It wasn't motivated by greed, power, or Dominion manipulation. Instead, it was a calculated decision rooted in principles he believed the Federation had abandoned. Why Eddington's betrayal was all an act? Here's where the layers peel back. Eddington's betrayal wasn't an abandonment of loyalty, it was an act of loyalty to a different cause. He saw himself not as a traitor, but as a freedom fighter. His monologues, his raids, and even his clashes with Sisko were part of an elaborate performance to sell his role as the Maquis champion. But fans who looked deeper realized that Eddington remained the same principled man he always was. His act was one of conviction, a dramatic mask to ensure the Maquis survived a war they could never win against two galactic powers. Eddington had to embody betrayal so completely that not even Sisko could see through it, because if Sisko doubted it for a second, the Dominion and Cardassians might too. In other words, Eddington betrayed Sisko, but he never betrayed his own ideals. His act was a masterclass in deception for the greater good. Star Trek's long tradition of espionage as loyalty. Eddington isn't alone. Star Trek often plays with the idea that betrayal can be a mask for loyalty. Consider Worf in The Way of the Warrior. Worf briefly questions his loyalties during the Klingon Federation conflict, but ultimately his apparent disloyalty to Gowron was part of a larger allegiance to honor and peace. Spock in the Enterprise incident. Spock pretends to betray Captain Kirk and the Enterprise to seduce the Romulan commander. For the Romulans, it looked like the ultimate treachery. For the audience, it was a brilliant act to secure cloaking technology. Dr. Julian Bashir's Section 31 infiltration. While Bashir never outright betrays his friends, his apparent cooperation with Section 31 was part of his long game to bring the organization down from within. These storylines show that in the Star Trek universe, betrayal can sometimes be theater, a necessary illusion to protect a higher loyalty. The emotional cost of pretend betrayal. What makes these storylines sting isn't just the deception, it's the emotional toll it takes on those left behind. For Sisko, Eddington's defection wasn't an abstract political maneuver. It was a personal wound. He saw it as a failure of his leadership, proof that he had misjudged a man under his command. And that's what made Eddington's act so convincing. He leaned into the role so thoroughly that even Sisko's legendary instincts couldn't pierce it. By the time the truth of his loyalty to the Maquis came to light, the damage was done. The betrayal felt real because to Sisko, it was real. This is the genius of betrayals that are acts. They don't just fool the enemies, they devastate allies. And sometimes, that devastation is exactly what sells the illusion. The audience as the betrayed. Another layer often overlooked is how these betrayals manipulate the audience. Fans watching at home experience the same gut punch that the characters did. When Spock appeared to betray Kirk, audiences gasped. When Eddington turned his back on Starfleet, fans felt personally betrayed, angry, confused, desperate to understand why. That's the magic. The writers weren't just tricking the characters, they were tricking the viewers too. And in doing so, they pulled the audience into the emotional stakes of the story, forcing them to wrestle with the same questions of loyalty, morality, and trust. Why Star Trek needs betrayals that aren't betrayals? In a universe built on utopian ideals, these fake betrayals are essential storytelling tools. They inject drama into a setting where outright treachery is rare. More importantly, they allow Star Trek to explore the murky gray areas of loyalty. Eddington's act asked whether loyalty to principle is more important than loyalty to authority. Spock's deception questioned whether friendship justifies manipulation. Bashir's Section 31 struggles forced viewers to weigh the morality of lying for a just cause. These storylines remind fans that Star Trek isn't about blind loyalty, it's about the difficult choices that define loyalty. Legacy of the greatest act of betrayal. Eddington's arc remains one of Deep Space Nine's most divisive but impactful storylines. To some, he was a traitor who abandoned Starfleet. To others, he was a man who sacrificed everything, including the trust of his captain, to uphold what he believed was right. In the end, his betrayal was never truly betrayal. It was an act, a performance written not for glory, but for survival. And by playing that role so convincingly, Eddington secured his place as one of the most complex, morally challenging figures in Star Trek history. Conclusion: the thin line between betrayal and loyalty. Star Trek fans may not have realized it at first, but one of the franchise's most shocking betrayals was never what it seemed. Eddington's treason, like Spock's and Bashir's before him, wasn't disloyalty, it was loyalty disguised as treachery. In the world of Star Trek, betrayal isn't always about turning your back on someone. Sometimes it's about convincing the galaxy you've turned your back, all while standing taller in your convictions than ever before. That's the brilliance of these stories. They challenge fans to see beyond the surface, to ask whether the act of betrayal might itself be the truest form of loyalty.